This is the DRF Players Podcast. Here are your hosts, Peter Thomas Fornatel and Jonathan Kinchin.
Hello and welcome to the DRF Players Podcast. No better way to start the show than with our friends Travis Stone, the voice of the Kentucky Derby, and the great Willie Nile heralding us in here. I'm Peter Thomas Fornatel, back with you in the Brooklyn bunker for this Friday, March 2nd show. Producer Craig just told me the number, and I don't remember already. I think it was 314. Not sure why I'm having such a block on those lately. But it's going to be a very fun episode of the DRF Players Podcast today. The racing is heating up. Lots of graded stakes action at Gulfstream Park, and we will be getting to that shortly. But some fun stuff to talk about before we get to this weekend's racing. And to chat about it all, I'm going to bring in this show's co-host, the People's Champion, the two-time semifinalist at the National Horseplayers Championship, the only man to land 2 entries in the top 10 at that event. He also won some tour that they put on. The People's Champion, Jonathan Kinchin. JK, what's up?
What's going on, Pete? Geez, that was nice of you this morning.
I don't know why I'm feeling so warm and fuzzy. I'm not even going to make fun of you today.
That's so sweet. It's one of my favorite things about doing this show is when people catch me in private and they're like, God, that Pete is sure rough on you, isn't he?
They don't know the half of it. I
always tell them, you let me catch Pete in a dark alley and see how tough he is.
I get mine from time to time. Certainly, I have a couple of good shots on the DRF Players Podcast bingo. We may have maybe some more bingo items that come up through the course of the show today. Get your cards and pencils ready, folks. I had an idea I haven't even told you yet, JK, and it relates. I'm going to put a pin in it because it relates to the first thing that we're going to talk about here today, and that is this new announcement that happened on Twitter last night. There's going to be an article out shortly on DRF.com. The feeders are already live on the DRF Tournament's website, tournaments.drf.com, which is the exclusive place to qualify for this World Horseplayers Tour pilot event. So I'll just ask you straight out, JK, what the heck is the World Horseplayers Tour, and what do you have to do with it?
Yeah, no, it's a new idea. It's pretty exciting. It's come from the idea of kind of putting the tournament scene in the horse players' hands. Friendly events, but importantly enough, it's an opportunity to present those events to the world. And in a way that I think a lot of people will agree is much more presentable than anything we've tried in the past in terms of selling it to an audience that is new to the sport, and then also an audience that is established in the sport. So it's really exciting, and there's a lot of different rule changes and a lot of different things that I think will kind of clean up some of the problems we've seen in the last 6 months with contest. But then I also think that it's exciting to have another opportunity to get our sport that we love so much on the airways and into people's living rooms.
It sounds very ambitious. Many have tried and failed to present. And I shouldn't even say failed, but tried and had limited amounts of success to present the act of horse playing on TV. We have seen some successes. I still marvel at how many people of all ages tell me they got into contests because they saw the Horse Players TV show. You're somebody who felt that way as well. But what's going to be different in terms of how is this going to work on TV, where other attempts have had more limited success of showing the fun of horse playing on television?
Yeah, so the idea is simple. The first event is going to be May 19th and 20th. I didn't say March. I always do that. It's May 19th. The Preakness contest that has gone on the last 4 or 5 years at Santa Anita will be partnering with the WHT for this event. The way that it will work, it's a $5,000 live bankroll tournament. You show up with your $5,000 on Saturday. There is 0 entry fee, similar to the Pegasus contest that we saw a few months back down at Gulfstream. So all $5,000 that you bring will be there for you to bet. You'll bet 5 races on Saturday. at $1,000 each. You'll be able to bet every race at Santa Anita and 3 selected stakes from Pimlico, obviously including the Preakness as one of those stakes. And here's where it gets interesting. This is where it changes, and I think where TV comes into play is the top 8 guys on Saturday
or gals
will advance to the final table on Sunday. This is where a majority of the show will be filmed. Those 8 players' bankrolls will be converted to mythical money. So if you turn your $5,000 into $32,000 on Saturday, Sunday morning you wake up, you put your $32,000 in your pocket, and now you have a $32,000 mythical bankroll in which you will now participate in every race at Santa Anita. You'll make a wager in every race, a mythical wager in every race at Santa Anita on Sunday. But here's the trick. It is win only, and there is an elevated blind structure. In the first race, you will have to bet $1,000. If there's 6 horses and one of them is 1-9 and you hate the race, it doesn't matter. You bet every race. You can go all in at any point, but you have to at least bet $1,000. In the second race, $1,500. The third race, $2,000, all the way up until the 9th race. Forgive my math, but I think it would end at like $4,500 in a 9-race card.
I think somebody just got bingo, by the way.
Someone just got a bingo. Yeah. And then the other aspect to it is I think the other important part, I didn't want to bury the lead, is well, where does this prize money come from? Well, it's being put up by the WHT, and it's over $150,000 in prizes. I believe the structure, I'd have to look at it, I don't have it in front of me, but I believe the winner will get $70,000. It's either $70,000 or $75,000 for first place. There's also some handle motivator and throughout the thing to try to get guys to participate on track. We know that's what our racetracks need. They need us to be funneling it through the window when we're on track rather than through our ADWs. And we know that can be problematic at times because of the rebates, but we're going to try to give a rebate of sorts through this kind of side competition. So that's pretty much the basic outline. I'm sure you can probably fill in some of the things I skipped.
Let's talk a bit about the why of this format. Why mythical money at the final table? Why win only? Why escalating minimum bets?
Yeah, I mean, I think that part of the problem is that, first of all, I think it can be very confusing if you try to explain to someone on TV how you front and back wheel the exacta. You thought the 11 was going to win, but he didn't win. He ran second, and I think that's just too much for like my grandmother to enjoy on TV. I think it's hard when you're watching a race run, very similar to poker. If you think about the bottom right corner where the cards were, it would say the percentage chance that someone has the win. So if you're not a poker guy, you know that this guy has these cards that can save him. He has this percentage of getting them, and it's easy to follow, easy to root for or root against someone. And I think that by limiting it to win and not having it be any more confusing than that helps with that problem. The other part of it I think that helps is that by making it mythical, no one is upset at us for making you bet your bankroll, your actual dollars that you can take and pay rent with or buy dinner with. It takes that part of the equation out, and it makes it kind of still allows it to be a game and there to be some strategy with the game without the consequence of actually losing your money in your pocket. However, just like a poker tournament, it doesn't lose the excitement because every place is actually worth money. If you think about the final table in a poker tournament, those guys, when they push, a million chips all in on their aces, they're not really putting $1 million in, but those million chips represent, $300,000, $400,000, $500,000, $600,000 based on the place that they could either gain or lose by winning or losing that hand.
Seems like the perfect blend of your actions having consequences, but you also have the freedom to play aggressively. Should make good TV. What I like about this idea is it cleaves very closely to that of a poker tournament. And one of the things, as you alluded to, JK, that's so fun about watching poker shows on TV, there becomes a cast of characters, players you root for, players you root against, but can you imagine anyone in the contest world somebody would actually want to watch a show and root against?
No, I can't think of anyone in any kind of silly outfit that people would. I guess that could be me though, right? I wear silly outfits.
You took it there. I was making a joke about you, but
Oh, jeez. You are. Here he comes. Here comes the
well, I was
bully.
nice. I was nice at the top of the show, so I figured it was an opportunity to take a little bit of a pot shot. But no, it sounds interesting. So, what is the future for this? Is it going to be one event after? Does it start in May and one event after another, or how do you see it unfolding?
Yeah, from what I understand, it's going to be more of a proof of concept with this event, and then comes the part of getting it onto a broadcasting medium, whether it be NBC Sports or ESPN or Travel Channel or Netflix, Amazon, Hulu, whatever it might be. I know that the idea with this whole situation was to maintain ownership. With this idea, the money was raised from individuals, and the reason that was important was to maintain ownership of the idea and not let the corporate entities that be influence the way that it all goes. So at the end of this Preakness contest, there's going to be an hour-long episode that's going to be able to be presented not as a concept, as an idea, or as a pitch. It's going to be a real thing. This is what an hour-long episode could be. And then here's the racetracks. We want to do 8 to 10 different events throughout the year. I think that's kind of what the plan is going to be moving forward. So if you like the sound of this, it's an important event to support. We talked about it with the WCH. Is what WCH did from a no takeout standpoint was such a positive move in the favor of the horse player that it was important, I think, as horse players that we participated in that event to encourage events like that to continue. We always are complaining about the unfair things of the world around us, takeout, this, that. Well, when someone's doing something that is in favor of what it is you're looking for, you got to support it in order to see it continue to move forward.
Vote with your dollar. That's the idea. And speaking of takeout, seems notable that DRF Tournament's the only place to qualify for this WHT pilot event at Santa Anita. The qualifiers are going to have takeout under 10%. It's higher than that. In full disclosure, it's a little bit higher than that in the feeders, but that comes down to a matter of dollars. Those diving into the qualifiers will be able to play for under 10% takeout. And folks, if you like the idea, and I've seen some chatter on Twitter, people saying basically, how can I help? Well, you can help by playing in the event for sure, and you can help by trying to qualify, whether it's in the feeders that are going to be running, I believe, every operating day on DRFT with a couple of different structures in those feeders. The qualifiers, first one's going to be Sunday, March 11th. You can participate in that and support this cool event that will hopefully soon be a TV show, and from there have an opportunity to become a real thing. You mentioned before about some of the politics. You were alluding, I guess, more than mentioned, to some of the politics involved, and you can see just from some of the key industry players that in one way or another are touching or adjacent to this event. Obviously, Daily Racing Forum, the only place you can qualify, supporting the event. Obviously, Stronach Group by allowing the event to be hosted at Santa Anita. That's nice. Also, I was a little bit interested to see NHC seats as part of the prize pool as well. Again, all added, nothing coming out of the players' pockets to fund the prize pool. So with all the politics involved here and getting these different entities to sort of work together in the same adjacent project, what's next, JK, Arabs and the Israelis?
Yeah, we'll see. I think it's also important to point out a couple of other points that we made. Let's explain the prize pool a little bit better, and then let's also talk about as much time as we've spent talking about collusion. Let's talk about some of the things I think that they're going to do differently that are going to help with that. First off, here's the prize structure. First place will get $70,000. Second place, $25,000. Third place, $15,000. Fourth place, $7,500. Fifth place, $5,000. Sixth, $2,500. Seventh, $1,000. In eighth place, okay, if you make it to the final table, the eighth place person gets absolutely nothing. Adds drama for TV. Now look, you didn't pay to get in the tournament, and if you got eighth place, you had a good day at the track, you're walking away with money. But we wanted it to be that way because I think that it creates a little bit more drama for TV. It matters a little bit more at those lower levels of getting eliminated, and so and it's also got some really down the rabbit hole ways of kind of preventing funny business, because making the final 8 doesn't guarantee you anything. And I'm sure we can elaborate that a little bit more. The Saturday and Sunday handle bonus. If you're the person on track that wagers the most on Saturday and Sunday, you get $10,000. Second, $5,000. Third, $2,500. Fourth, $1,500. Fifth, $1,000. And then we're going to pay 6th through 10th $500 for your efforts. You'll have a player's card, 2 players cards, one for the contest, one for out of the contest, and you'll be able to bet your pick 4s, your pick 5s, your pick 6s, your Rainbow 6 at Gulfstream, your pick 4 at Pimlico. All of those things will be tracked, and the person who bets the most over those 2 days will get $10,000.
It's worth pointing out, just to piggyback on a couple of things you already said, JK, that the switch to mythical money, basically, that might sound radical, but it's actually taking precisely from poker. As you pointed, I mean, you pointed that out in your example, but I think it's worth underlining the idea that a poker final table essentially is just a contest with mythical money. So what you're doing is attempting to get the best of both worlds here, where you have a live bankroll event that's going to generate handle, help the track, help the horseman. And then at the final table, you're going to be able to have gameplay that much more resembles, not identical to, because it's a different pursuit, but very much resembles what you're going to see in a poker tournament with real world consequences, where you can't just play a horse. I mean, I guess you theoretically could play a horse because of the price it is on the board, but that's likely to bust you down if you're just reaching a sling you don't really like, likely to bust you down into a part of that prize pool that you mentioned where you don't want to be. And you mentioned also the idea of the last place finisher getting 0. Without getting too down the rabbit hole, there have been some very legitimate concerns brought up by players about the possibility of contest manipulation by bets not within a contest, but without a contest. It's kind of down the rabbit hole, like I said, but I feel like this situation makes that not even worth attempting, because you're going through all this risk, you're going through all this trouble, and you're not guaranteed to participate in the prize pool.
Right.
We should talk a little bit more about the collusion stuff, unless you had anything else.
Yeah, well, 2 more things. And you can't lay up at the final table, right? Which is great. You can't, the leader that's going in, okay, the leader that's going in does not have to win. And in fact, we're involved in just a little practice version of this. And the guy who started with a mythical $26,000 ended with 0 and got last.
Right.
It doesn't, you can't lay up. You can't bet show just to kind of get through. You have to pick winners at that final situation. And I think that that's important. The other thing to note, just to be clear, is that the $150,000 in prizes is not being contributed by the racetrack. They're not putting that money, Santa Anita's not putting that money up. Now, they are putting up the Pegasus, the 2 NHC seats, and like maybe like a random $3,500 for the prize pool to make some things work out. But they're not, this money is coming from the WHT. The WHT is putting in right at about $150,000 towards this prize pool. So it's not like a weird rebate situation where it's going to get confusing, where, you know what I mean? It's not that at all. So I wanted to make sure I was clear about that. And then on to the collusion stuff. Do you want to introduce most of that?
Absolutely. People know it's a subject near and dear to me. Biggest thing is this, like a golf. Well, again, let's just stick to poker. That's the best analogy. 1 entry per person. However, there is the opportunity for rebuys, but there are 2 things that are important to note about a rebuy. Your first entry has to be gone for the rebuy to occur. You have to still be able to make your 5 remaining plays on the Saturday for a rebuy to occur. And a rebuy, you've got to pay $6,000 for that $5,000 entry. In other words, there's no like strategic, well, maybe there's a strategic benefit to rebuying, but there's no way to sort of game the system and have de facto extra entries without paying a penalty. And that penalty is that extra $1,000 that will also go directly to that prize pool as we've discussed. So I like that change a lot. I understand why contests allow multiple entries. It makes sense from an economic point of view. But I mean, if you really want to try to position horse playing as something more akin to poker, ultimate test of skill, true championship level events, I feel like one entry per person is great. The other knock I had heard in the past about one entry per person, somebody's going to enter their grandmother. Somebody's going to, there's going to be a process to screen beards out of the event. There's going to be very close look at plays to make sure there's no coordination of plays among horse players. So-called handicapping families, whatever you want to call them, absolutely welcome. You can talk to your friend about handicapping the races. You can give your friend advice on what he or she should play. You cannot coordinate with your friend about what he plays or he or she plays along with what you are playing. These results will be carefully audited by basically a team of auditors, and I truly believe that it's not going to be worth anybody's while to attempt to bend the rules, and there's sort of a fail-safe against that as well. I'll let you talk about that.
Yeah, the other thing about it is we're doing something that I feel like maybe 7 to 9 people in the world are going to be upset about, and that's we're going to release plays. So the plays will be made public after the contest is over. And for the people that believe that they have some proprietary information that they're not willing to share, the beautiful thing about the racetrack is you can go downstairs and you can bet at the teller. You do not have to participate in this contest. But in order for us to maintain the integrity of this contest, the integrity of this sport, we have to make it all above board. I know that in poker, a lot of guys at the beginning of poker hesitated about the hole cams. And eventually they realized that they wanted to participate in that event that created so much value for their craft, then they had to deal with it. And that's the approach that the WHT is going to take. They're going to release those plays, and it will kind of work as a little bit of a self-policing system. If someone tries funny business, horse players are complainers. Look at Twitter; they'll find them, and we'll get it taken care of from there. The other thing is that the WHT is going to take the pit boss approach. If you're suspected to be counting cards, whether it's true or not, you're out, and they don't let you back in. And I think the WHT is going to rule with that iron fist. If you're doing funny beard business and Miss Kinchin shows up, being my mother playing in an event, then that's problematic. And because she's never played in one before, and so those types of situations are going to be policed heavily, and there's definitions in the rules of beards. And the other thing to keep in mind is that the official rules will be out today at some point. So they'll pop them up at some point today. They were just getting some final revisions and making sure everything was clear on them. But the rules will be out officially before the end of the day.
I like it. And I'm sure folks are thinking, well, about this policing, how could you do it? How could you do it? One is just a careful examination of the plays, especially with that possibility of having, not possibility, with the actuality of having essentially half a day or more between the end of day one and the final table. All those qualifying players' plays can be really gone over with a fine-tooth comb. And there'll also be an interview process. If an unfamiliar player wants to play, Nate Newby at Santa Anita might have a conversation with that person to ascertain what business they have playing in the event. And in addition to that, players who bust out with unusual plays along the way on throughout the first day of the tournament, randomly playing different horses in a race where somebody else doubled up, for example. That person might be interviewed to see why they play those horses. If the answer doesn't pass muster, that person won't be playing in future events.
In the like the fishing things, they make the guys take lie detector tests.
That's right.
We're not asking anybody to do that. It's just like, look, if it's a simple example. Like if I bring my buddy Mike Epps to the racetrack, Okay, Mike Epps he was on tour with me in 2015. He always tells me that. He's like, I'm on tour. I'm going to get back on tour with you. And all he did, he just hung out. He hung out. He listened to Horse Players, and he went like to the window and just slipped in bets on what we were talking about. He never played in a contest. If he shows up and plays in a contest, suspicious, right? However, if when the plays are pulled and people look, they're going to see that Mike Epps bet things that were completely different than me, and there was no coordination evident in what we were doing. Now, if my mom shows up and she plays, and we go all in with 2 entries in the same race, and I bet 4 horses and she bet 4 horses, it's problematic. And my mom and myself will not be allowed to play in any more WHC events. It's really not that big of a deal. It's just straightforward.
I'm going to make you tell your mom she's kicked out, though. I'm not doing that.
She's an emotional thing too. She wouldn't like it.
All right, I think we've laid the groundwork pretty well for that. Like we said, you can get involved in the feeders now. World Horseplayers Tour is on Twitter, isn't it, JK? Where can people follow?
Yeah, I think it's they tweeted last night for the first time. I believe it is at Horseplayer Tour. At Horseplayer Tour.
At Horseplayer Tour. For further questions, that's probably the best source of information. We'll fill in wherever we can. Seems like an exciting development, and I think this show and Horse Players should try to support it. Now, to go all the way back to the beginning of the show, when I said I had an idea related to the bingo that we needed to talk about this first. I haven't even told you this, JK, but this is my idea. When it comes time for this pilot episode being filmed over Preakness weekend to be shown, how about trying to find a venue, I don't know, somewhere in Del Mar, somewhere in certain pavilion in Saratoga, museum in Saratoga, who knows, set up a situation where you have a live episode of the DRF Players podcast followed by a screening of the pilot. And to make it better and more fun and interactive, under each person's seat for the live podcast will be their own unique bingo card. They can play bingo along with us live for the live episode of the podcast. What do you think?
That would be remarkable. I'd imagine there'll be some adult beverages there. If you're keeping track, there's another bingo square for you. I believe that was on there. So yeah, that would be good. That would be good.
That's my thought. I went to a fun live podcast the other night, and it just got me thinking about what kind of fun and interactive things we could do when we eventually. You talked about your tour back in 2015. Eventually, we got to get this podcast show on the road. Perhaps finding some ways to coordinate with this exciting new tour might make sense. Should we talk about some races, or you got anything else you want to yap about before we get down to brass tacks here?
I enjoy racing.
You enjoy racing, so let's get to racing. Gulfstream, lots of good stuff going on. I looked at least briefly at all of the stakes races on Saturday, starting with race 6, which I believe is the Palm Beach. Didn't seem like the most exciting race in the history of the world from a betting point of view. In fact, Speed Franco, the favorite, looked very, very tough to me as a potential lone speed in a race that Timeform US says is going to favor early speed anyway. Devotee of early speed that you are, did you go any further than Speed Franco in this one?
Yeah, no, well we got to jump back to the very one at some point. But we'll hit the 6th first, the Palm Beach. I liked Speed Franco, and the horse makes sense. And like if I was playing multi-race bets, you have to use him just on his figures here in a 115 Timeform last time. So you have to consider, but I'm going to kind of dip back a little bit to the 6th horse, the Therapist, the Christophe Clement horse. That horse ran really well back at Belmont as a 2-year-old, had a nice number back then, and we talk about it. I talked about it in the out of the gate, and we'll talk about it when we get to the Fountain of Youth. I love that natural progression that you get in the figure with a 2-year-old to a 3-year-old, and so I think Therapist obviously will be the second choice. Could drift a little bit. I'm a little bit fearful of if Speed Franco is going to be like just sent from down in there, or they're going to do that Rady thing where they invite others in. And I feel like if others are invited in and Speed Franco doesn't take advantage of his speed, then I think Therapist could sit a nice trip with Irad and for Christophe Clement. So I think my top pick there will be Therapist.
Gotcha. But you would also advise maybe backing up one way in an exacta and in contests, Yeah, Therapist isn't going to be short enough that in contest play I would think you would want to take over Speed Franco, unless I don't know. But I'll give you a scenario that might just happen. Speed Franco even money 4-5, and you see Therapist at 5-2 in a live contest. Who would you play?
I would probably take Therapist, just because here's the thing: is regardless how short Speed Franco goes off at, people in contests won't play Speed Franco. They'll play the second choice just by like this like rule that they have written in their bones that they can't do anything different. They won't take a favorite. So I would feel that if Therapist were to win, he would be much more problematic because of the amount of people that used him, not so much the price and what he'll pay.
Fair enough. Did you have any thoughts on the two in here? The other one, or one of the other ones who will get bet, Maraud for Todd Pletcher. One thing I noticed, the running style I just found very intriguing. You don't see too many horses on the Timeform preview screen that have the exact same rating early and late. It didn't really bring me to the horse or anything, but seemed like a horse to talk about out of interest, at least, as one who could maybe finish and be heard from at some point down the line in these graded stakes for 3-year-olds, even if today isn't necessarily the day.
When I look at a race and I'm like kind of rating the horses and I say, oh, I like Speed Franco as the most likely winner. I think Therapist is the second most likely winner. And then Maraud is probably the third most likely winner. When that third most likely winner is a Chad Brown or a Todd Pletcher, it's really easy for me to toss because they're going to be overbet. Their ability to actually win the race is significantly less than what their price is going to be. And so I usually get away from those types of horses, and sometimes it'll bite you.
Totally solid point. Let's move on to race 7, grade 3. Here comes the Bride. Who did you come up with in here, JK?
The 4-horse Brittata is one that I've always kind of followed. I think that horse, really quickened well last time at 7.5. First time out this year, was just much the best in that race. I just think that horse is going to be super tough in here. Nothing else really jumps out as like super problematic to me. And do I really need to convince you into taking Chad on the grass?
It does tend to work out. And this is one where there are excuses. You could say, oh, she's bet so many times and, took 5 times to get it done, et cetera, et cetera. Did have, to me, a little bit of a setup too last time, those figures coded red from Timeform US. But yeah, I feel like when you dig deeper into those older races, there are enough excuses that she's not one I'd be looking to key, but she's not one I'd be looking to take on particularly. A horse that I was just really interested to see run that I can't really call a tip, but I'm interested how they bet too. Number 1, Princess Warrior. Obviously has the grade 1 form in that race. That should we give him another bingo? The grade 1 Alcibiades, Alcibiades has that form on display. And the problem here, of course, has never been on turf. The midshipman numbers are good on turf, but neither Kenny McPeak's numbers nor anything about the dam and her progeny suggest turf. So this is one where she's shown enough finishing on dirt and has enough on the sire side to say maybe a turf horse that, if like ignored, could be a horse I would use in a contest. But I feel like is just another one where you kind of have to use and not to key. What do you make of Princess Warrior?
I just feel that they're trying to find something, right? And I don't prefer the switch to turf when you're trying to find something. I prefer it when you're trying to, when there's something that leads you to it. The horse has never worked on the turf. Maybe not. Maybe they have public, like they galloped on the turf and it didn't get registered as a work. But if you look back, the last 4 works at Payson were on the dirt. And as far as I am concerned, they have a turf course that you don't have to be a stakes type to work on. And technically this one would be a stakes type. So, I get it, but I'll pass.
Yeah, the price would have to be right for me to consider. At the lower end of the odds spectrum, Amertum looked pretty interesting to me. Just the form of that race has worked out pretty well with a couple of runners coming back to win. Another just obvious one, Wertheimer and Frere and Todd Pletcher and JRV in the corner. Another one who I think would be on any of my multi-race wagers that touched race 70. Here comes the Bride. Anything against her?
No, not anything against her. It's just more of a love for this Chad situation. Not to mention that Peter Brandt bought a lot of nice horses up, and he's been making some noise, and I think that this one is another talented one.
And his wife's in one of my favorite videos. Let's talk about race 8, the Devona Dale Grade 2. You have a strong opinion in this race?
Not strong. I think that Fly So High is slightly aggressive with the even money morning line, but
I think that'll be dead on. Or do you mean in terms of as a morning line guessing what the public will bet, or do you think in terms of her chance of winning?
I think if the morning line is even money, I mean they usually go off under that, right? I mean,
more often than not.
Yeah, I just don't really see that happening. I mean, the race at Aqueduct was great.
Oh, we're gonna have a bet. We're gonna have a bet here.
Okay, well
we got a double fig over the field, who looks great to me in terms of the reckoning of the race, but just in terms of things that are going to catch money, you've got Sexy Connections and those two last Buyer Spade figures higher than the rest. I think even money or below for sure. But what should we bet?
You want to bet where she goes off?
Yes.
Oh no, I don't want to bet. I'll
You're backing right down now. Okay, that's how it's gonna be. That's fine.
No, I'll go head to head with you.
That's more of a jump ball, but to be sporting, you know what? I'll go ahead and do it. Well, depending on what we're betting on, but I'm much more intrigued by I'm sure I'm right about the other thing. So obviously I was going to be a bit more aggressive with what I was willing to put up, and I might have shaved my head off that. But what do you think? What do you feel like wagering?
I want the 7 cachet.
Okay. Yeah,
cachet. Or cash it, yeah, whatever one it is.
It's probably cash, right?
Yeah, I would probably. I was there when she broke her maiden, and it was impressive. I mean, first of all, she got bet down to practically even money. She was that buzz filly all around town in Miami that everyone was like, "Ooh, she's gonna run, she's gonna run." She's like 6-1 morning line. She missed the break a little bit. She just drew off right there in front of us. I mean, it was impressive. And I've talked about Mark Hiddick have a lot of 3-year-olds kind of popping right now. She's one of them. He's got strike power later in the Fountain of Youth. I think she's going to be tough second time. She's the one that I want here.
Worth mentioning that the form of that race has worked out well too, with Romantic Moment, who ran a 62 buyer there, coming back to run a 78. Secret Pleasure did not run well coming out of it, but then Coach Rocks also came back to win, improving the figure from a 59 to an 81. Definitely a live horse, definitely a cool horse, and a good little head-to-head for us on Saturday. Should we just decide the stakes later?
Yeah, we probably shouldn't dive into the facial hair situation again. We've already, especially when you have the even money shot. Yeah, we'll do it.
We can discuss on Twitter later, unless you come up with a brilliant brainstorm.
We'll think of something.
Before the end of the show. All right. Meantime, now the 9th, we take a break from the graded stakes portion of the program. You're free to mention a thought if you have it, but I didn't even look.
No, you don't. Nothing. You talk about the claiming race?
Yeah. I just, I know you love your picks. I figured you might have had something. So then we'll just move it on to race 10. Where we have the Canadian Turf staying at the grade 3 level. There is one I like in here. What'd you come up with?
Yeah, it's nothing I'm super high on, but there is one that I will not be able to resist betting this horse, and that's Hoagie. Look, I get it. The horse is a sprinter. He's going to be trying a mile for the first time. But what circumstance do you want? What circumstance do you want for that situation to be being tried? It's at Gulfstream, which is obviously if you're going to run a mile and you're not supposed to, where do you want to do it? On that hard surface down in South Florida. The other thing is, who is the king of the stretch out? In my opinion, Mike Maker can get any horse to run a mile and a half. that runs miles. Surely he can get this 5 furlong horse to run a mile, right? I know that's not exact math, but
not sure that's how it works.
I know.
Jonathan tries, math fails. We had 2 this show.
I am interested, though, with the talent that this one has, the ability to quicken, obviously, from his 5 furlong races. If he can relax a little bit, I kind of like the switch to Irad here. Patient rider, will sit chilly on him. Naturally, the horse will be a little bit closer than normal because the pace is obviously going to be slower than he normally does. He kind of falls out of the back of his turf sprints anyways. He'll be sitting 4th or 5th, and hopefully he'll be able to quicken past these horses. He obviously has the class. I
like March in this spot. I think he's got excellent finish. I like him in the 3rd spot off a layoff. I think he runs well enough at Gulfstream. I think the last race was kind of a buried, pretty good effort, really, all things considered. And I just think I think he shapes up well against this field. So 2 more thoughts for folks there when it comes to race 10 on Saturday. Anything else you have to say about this race, JK, before we turn the page?
No, I think I'm excited about Hoagie. Highland Sky has always been one that I've followed, but he's just consistently let me down. So I can't fall for that trap anymore.
It is interesting. He ran sort of a different type of race last time, at least when you're judging by the internal fractions. Definitely running much faster early than ever before. But of course, difference in dynamics, dirt and turf might be what that's all about. And I agree. He just seems like one. There have been times where I've absolutely loved him. I guess it was the Belmont Derby, which was the actual Belmont Derby, which was a race where I loved him a couple of years ago and been fortunate to not chase him too much since. But yeah, I'm with you. I mean, especially if we're looking at a price anywhere near that morning line of 3 to 1, he might just be one of those ones where if he happens to win, I just throw up my hands and say, "Oh, well, now he wins when I'm off." But I'm kind of with you. I'm not sure I want to go down that road. The 11th is actually kind of an interesting maiden special weight where I think Shug's personal time looks like he's going to take a lot of beating and looks like an interesting horse to follow going forwards. I haven't done the race properly yet. Did you have a chance to look at this one?
No, I remember the horse personal time. He is going to take a lot of money. He's a foal to a Derby winner in Orb, so obviously that goes a long way. Yeah, I mean, I think he's going to be overbet. And he doesn't have a lot of early speed. So from that inside, he's going to have to drop back and then circle, and he'll need pace in front of him, and he'll need to not get stopped. There's a lot of needs for a horse who's going to be so short. I mean, I think Traveling Midas makes a little bit of sense for Lynch, but the rest of it was just kind of tricky. It feels like some horse that I never was going to find is going to win this race, and I struggle in those spots.
I will agree. Personal time, more one to watch than to bet. But if I were putting picks together, over bet or not, I'm not going to lose to him in a pick if I have strong opinions in the other legs. Do you agree with that, or do you think he's one to properly take on?
No, I wouldn't take him on. But I think a lot of people in a race that's very tricky, you're either going to have to go with 2 or go with 6. And I worry going with 6 with how talented he is problematic. To me, you use 2, you single, or you play the pick 3.
Interesting. All right. Well, speaking of that, pick 3, it's going to kick off with the sprint. I'll let you begin on this one.
Yeah, I used 2 horses to start the pick 3 on out of the gate. I like the 6 Favorable Outcome and the 9 Mr. Jordan. For whatever reason, I've always been kind of a speed of the speed guy, but for some reason in these 6.5 races, I start feeling like this is the most closer-friendly distance in racing, and it's not always at every racetrack, but I know it is for sure. It feels like it's Santa Anita. I have a friend who's got a model who actually told me that he agreed with that idea at Santa Anita, that 6.5 is the most closer-friendly. I feel like it's a little bit everywhere, right? It's just kind of that in-between distance of rationing speed and going on with it, and I feel like in races that do have a lot of presence of speed, it sets up well for closers, and I think Favorable Outcome is one of the closers I'll want there. Ran really well in the Malibu, one of my favorite races in the world. In that race, closing into a pace that wasn't exactly supersonic where City of Light won. It's Chad at South Florida. Obviously, we'll see all the workout reports coming back. And then the 9, Mr. Jordan, the cutback. I kind of like the cutbacks to 6.5 and 7. Don't love them, the cutbacks to 6, for kind of the opposite reasons of what I discussed earlier about the pace. So I think Mr. Jordan will be in position to come running late. Has run well at Gulfstream. Hasn't got a 1 there. Hasn't won at Gulfstream, but has run second 5 times. So I think that there's probably a chance that this one could pick up the pace a little bit, pick up the pieces, if the pace happens to fall apart. But my top pick would be a favorable outcome.
Kind of boring here. I like the same 2 as you, but I do love JK, how in your speed crazy world, a horse who in his last 3 races has basically combined 3 lengths back at both the first and second call, like favorable outcome, counts as a closer. I would describe him as more of a stalk and pounce type. And I do agree with you, though, that it looks like that's the trip that's going to get it done.
If you aren't on the lead, or your head is not equal to the horse who's on the lead, then you're coming from off the pace in Jonathan Kinchin's world.
Well, you were right about the coming from off the pace. It was more just the term closer that made me chuckle to myself a little bit.
Toss them all. There's 2 types of horses. There's speed horses and closers, right? I do know that there's 4 to 5 types, but I just like to just simplify it.
We'll get to talk about a plotter in the next race. But before we leave this race, I want to talk to you about the early pace here. Few interesting angles to Extravagant Kid down at the rail, though I worry this could be one of those situations where race design makes it very tricky, because you've got Extravagant Kid with speed down at the rail, should Velasquez choose to use it, which is obviously tricky. So often you see horses break slowly when they're breaking out of that chute. And then you also have speed on the far outside with Navarro and Rock and Fellers, who's such obvious speed that you could almost see Johnny trying to let that one go and flop outside despite breaking from the rail. Do you think this is going to be a fast pace, and who do you think is going to make the lead?
I think it will. When there's speed drawn inside and outside, that usually results in a little bit of pace. 8 Town, the Brian Lynch horse, he didn't show much speed last time, but he did show speed in the past. So I think he's one that you'd want to keep an eye out for and being involved in the early situation. Classic Rock, a little bit. I think that horse could be involved, and he's in the middle. I think they'll run a little bit. These are talented horses, and I think that they will run a little bit. So there's 2 horses in here that I do want to mention, and it's not really positive, but just want to say. No Holding Back Bear was at one point a classy type, but seems to be going the wrong direction. In 2017, just never really involved himself outside of that race at Belmont where he ran second, then kind of went downhill from there. Maybe the reset will help him. I'll let someone else decide what to do with him. And then the 10 Unbridled Outlaw. That horse was always meant to be a good horse, and showed some really nice performances at times, has always shown up well in the workout reports. I remember in the past with some really nice works. He's a half to J-Boy's Echo. I think that horse could be one that could pick up the pieces if it were to fall apart. But, I'll just wanted to point them out for the people that are a little bit more daring than I am. I think I only need 2 in here.
No Holding Back Bear, for me, his claim to fame was when Paul Matisse and I both mentioned him for the 2016 the seminar we did at NYRA at Saratoga on Travers Day. We mentioned him and got laughed at, and he ran 3rd at 25 to 1. So, just don't mess with us, JK. That's all I'm saying.
No, I would never mess with you.
Let's move on to the race I was talking about, alluding to earlier with the plotter, which, according to the Craig Mulkowski definition, which I love, is a horse that really doesn't do the running until the turn stops. In other words, just all the running in the stretch, which can often be a recipe for some frustrations for win bettors, and can often be a boon for those keying in 3rd and 4th spots. Sadler's Joy certainly does win. Famously, speaking of Travers Days, on a Travers Day undercard last year, in a very delightful photo for our little party. But generally speaking, is coming from far back and has a little bit of, it's just, dynamics are typically going to play a horse who does all the running so late, as good as those stretch runs tend to be. Coming off the layoff here as well, do you think this is one do you think I may be right in my idea to try to not go crazy taking him on, but take him on a little bit here, or am I getting myself into trouble by betting against the horse with the best form in the race?
Yeah, I mean, the last time you look down, you'll see that he had an 80-day layoff from 2016 to 2018, and he ran well. He ran second, beaten ahead by Taglib on this racetrack at 1.5 miles. So I think it's easy to consider. I think he's the classiest one in here, and I'll always pick Sadler's Joy because not only was that a fun moment for us in the pick six at Saratoga, he's also the horse that essentially helped us create that wonderful moment with Chad yelling and the baby crying. So he beat Money Multiplier, who was being asked not to hang. So no, all jokes aside, I use 4 horses here, and these races are tough. I love them. They're to a certain extent. I feel like that you can design a 1.5 mile turf race sometimes better than you can the shorter ones because there's not so much of a scramble to lead and da-da-da-da-da. The horses just kind of fall out of the gate, and then they get in a position where they feel comfortable. There's obviously some tricky pace dynamics that can happen, but I used 4 horses in here in the pick 3 that I gave out. I used the 1 Sadler's Joy, the 7 Bernay, the 9 Nessie, and the 12 Oscar nominated. The 9 Nessie and Oscar nominated just because it's Maker. They ran well last time, and he does really, really well in these types of races. And they're both talented horses with nice riders, right? I mean, I got Jose and Javier, so I'm good with that. I think if I was playing a contest, I'll probably play Bernay, the Chad Brown horse that ran first time for him last night. It's not a cell phone. That is not a bingo square. That was a landline. That is not a bingo square.
Who still has a landline, JK? Oh, I guess I do.
Bernay, the Michael Dubb head of Plains horse that Chad has that ran first time in the U.S. last time, closing into a slow pace. If you can get those Chads closing into slow paces, he's typically aware enough to instruct his rider to do things that are a little bit different. It's a big, full field. I feel like the pace will be honest enough. Enough guys will try to get cute and try to walk this thing down on the front end, and I think they'll probably go honest. Bernay will be my top pick here at 10-1. I think I'll be happy if I get 6-1.
I'm glad we have that head-to-head bet earlier because everything else, it's like the agreement factory here today. Yeah, Bernay, to me, seems quite possible this race, or at least one quite like it. The target the whole time. I thought the last race was probably a little bit better than it looked on the rare form. I think the way the horse was bet there, too, shows that it was not the goal. You know what I mean? So
yeah, this horse reminds me of how some people would probably try to pronounce Matt Bernier's last name, Bernay.
You hear that all the time, and don't get it wrong, it's TV's Matt Bernier. And the best part about these bespoke bingo cards we're going to have is we can shift in some other names, so we can get the Silver Baffert wig in there, we can get producer Craig in there, we can get TV's Matt Bernier in there, and it's going to be good. And speaking of silver wigs, you might want to turn yours in, JK, for some type of Mike Maker merchandise at this point.
Yeah, I don't know what would be a nice indicator of Mike. Maybe just not talking.
just come on the podcast and not talk for a little while. I love the guy. You're making fun of him. All right.
No, he's great. No, I think I'm one of his biggest fans. I think he's the most underappreciated trainer in America. What he can do with horses. We always had this conversation. If you had that $1 million yearling, who would you give it to? There's a lot of names popping up for me. I would give it to George Weaver. I would give it to Mike Maker. There's a lot of people that I respect that I think that do a good job, and he's one of them that doesn't get the credit that the Todd, the Chads, and the Bobs get.
He does not talk as much as those guys. That's true. I don't know how I let this happen. Bad hosting. We've got 6 minutes left, and we've still got 2 races left. Oh, no, we did. I'm so sorry. Is this on the bingo? Pete gets completely confused as to where he is. We're at perfect because we have one race left, and it's the Fountain of Youth. I got to write the extended closer look for this one, Jonathan. So I've already spilled something like 2,500 words, and I've worn out my formulator. I sent you one of my stats earlier in the week, and I said, Mike Hogan, eat your heart out. I was working formulators so hard in looking at this fountain of youth. So folks want my in-depth thoughts. You can find that in the Derby Countdown Guide. Obviously, I'll give my quick opinion here. My quick opinion less interesting, I think, than the full write-up. But where did you go? It seems to me that there's a horse that stands above the market, a very logical alternative, and then a bunch of horses who will be lucky to crack the exacta. How did you see it?
Yeah, I am a big believer. We talked about it earlier. I'm a big believer in that 2-year-old to 3-year-old progression, where if a horse runs a number as a 2-year-old, then they're expected to, not expected, but the natural progression of growth and maturity will see them run a figure on the Beyer scale. It's 10 to 15 points faster, 10 to 12 just on maturity alone. And so a horse like Good Magic, who ran the number that he ran, the time form figure that he ran, it was faster than what anyone else in this race has done as a 3-year-old or as a 2-year-old. So if he sees that natural progression, that natural improvement that you would suggest you're going to see from 2 to 3, then he's going to run in the 120s on the time form scale, and he's going to run significantly faster on the Beyer scale. So, well, is he getting better? And last week, Economic Model won a grade 3 at Gulfstream, and in the last 2 works, I looked at the 24th workout report. When the workout report comes out for tomorrow, or for the 3rd, obviously you'll be able to see that. But the last 2 works that Good Magic had were with Economic Model, and Economic Model and Good Magic were working head and head with no one really being the standout there. But you would expect that the older horse might give the business to the younger horse, and Good Magic seems to be in good form. I think he's going to run well.
I love that amount of work you did, and I'm kicking myself that I didn't make you. You'd made that observation, I think, when we talked about Economic Model before, and I forgot when writing the Countdown Guide to throw that fact in there. That's definitely a big sign of readiness. He's obviously the most likely winner. I think I said in the thing he'd be a bet at even money. I think he'll be odds on. I think he'll be shorter than that. But, and just sort of like basic horse player stuff here. If there's kind of feels like, if there's a time to beat him, maybe the time off the layoff with a horse who they clearly are thinking about roses for, maybe this would be the time. And Free Drop Billy, a horse we've talked about a lot on this show, who I've always liked, including last time, who is now second off the layoff with that race under his girth, might be poised to take a step forward. Some of that formulator work that I alluded to before, JK, looking at the Dale Romans winners looking at the winners in 3-year-old stakes routes in the last 5 years, there were 3 of them. They were all second off the layoff. It just seems to me like this could be a time where he fires a big shot, and I think he's the logical alternative, more of a, in my mind anyway, like a 2-3 to 1 chance, who I think should be longer than that. And of course, whatever I do betting wise, I would have a straight one-way Good Magic over Free Drop Billy to win the same amount. Like, I don't think he's a more likely winner at all, but I just think the value of the race might be locking him into finishing at least second. And the clever way of playing it, rather than just boxing the exacta with the 2 favorites, might be bet the 2 to win and then play that single exacta and then maybe mess around in some tries as well. Do you see a horse here for vertical players, JK, or for contest players who need a price at this time? If I'm forcing you to think about prices in this race, where are you going?
Yeah, no, I was actually going to say that. If you're playing in a WHT qualifier this weekend or feeder this weekend and you're going into the last race, I'd imagine this is going to be on the back end of the card, being race 14. It'll be on the back end of a contest. But I would love to be in a position where Good Magic, I'm on the lead, Good Magic protects me. I don't have to play him. And then I can look for 2 horses that I think will present a little bit more value. And those 2 horses would be Strike Power, being the speed of the speed, being on the improve, having some gaudy figures, trying 2 turns for the first time, will probably be dismissed. Not so much because of the connections, but just because of the other speed and not the big names. I think that I would like to give Strike Power a chance at what I think will probably drift up from 4 to 1. And then I'd have absolutely no problem taking the 7 Gotta Go, who was closing into Strike Power last time. But second off for Ian Wilkes, we talked about Ian Wilkes being one of those guys with a target that you want to depend on to kind of get a horse ready to rock and roll. So Gotta Go would be my price play at 10-1 on the morning line.
More agreement, for better or worse. Gotta Go would be the one that I would want third in those tries, would use a little bit for second, probably behind those other two. And in a contest situation, I think you could absolutely use On the Nose, especially if you're lucky enough to be in a position to have the protection of both Good Magic and Free Drop Billy. If I were in a contest situation and I needed to just pick the winner, I would certainly go with Free Drop Billy over Gotta Go. But if I didn't need those points, if I was able to have that protection, Gotta Go would be the next place I would go. And we gotta go, JK, because we have reached the end of another episode of the DRF Players Podcast. I want to thank you, Travis Stone, Willie Nile, for more of his music. Check out willienile.com. Most of all, I want to thank all of you for tuning in. We'll get back to some of your questions on Tuesday. We'll also analyze these races from Gulfstream and talk a little bit more about the World Horseplayers Tour. Come join us Preakness weekend at Santa Anita, and you can qualify exclusively at DRF tournaments. We'll be back on Tuesday. I'm Peter Thomas Fornatale. May you win all your photos.